Hello, this is Michael White. I'm reading from the 7th grade science textbook. We are on Chapter 4, Lesson 3, Chemical Compounds in Cells. My Planet Diary. Energy backpacks. Some people think a camel's humps carry water. Not true. They actually store fat. A hump's fatty tissue supplies energy when the camel doesn't eat. When a camel has enough food, the hump remains hard and round. But when food is scarce, the hump gets smaller and may sag to the side. If the camel then gets more food, the hump can regain its full size and shape in about 3 or 4 months. What are elements and compounds? You are made of many substances. These substances supply the raw materials that make up your blood, bones, muscles, and more. They also take part in the processes carried out by your cells. Elements. You've probably heard of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, maybe phosphorus and sulfur too. All of these are examples of elements found in your body. An element is any substance that cannot be broken down into simpler substances. The smallest unit of an element is a particle called an atom. Any single element is made up of only one kind of atom. Compounds. Carbon dioxide and water are examples of compounds. Compounds form when 2 or more elements combine chemically. Most elements in living things occur in the form of compounds. For example, carbon dioxide is a compound made up of the elements of carbon and oxygen. The smallest unit of many compounds is a molecule. A molecule of carbon dioxide consists of 1 carbon atom and 2 oxygen atoms. Compare the diagrams of the carbon dioxide molecule and the water molecule in Figure 1. What compounds do cells need? Many of the compounds in living things contain the element carbon. Most compounds that contain carbon are called organic compounds. Organic compounds that you may have heard of include nylon and polyester. Compounds that don't contain carbon are called inorganic compounds. Water and table salt are familiar examples of inorganic compounds. Some important groups of organic compounds that living things need are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Water is a necessary inorganic compound. Many of these compounds are found in the foods you eat. This fact makes sense because the foods you eat come from living things. Carbohydrates. You've probably heard of sugars and starches. They are examples of carbohydrates, energy-rich organic compounds made of the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The food-making process in plants produces sugars. Fruits and some vegetables have a high sugar content. Sugar molecules can combine, forming larger molecules called starches, or complex carbohydrates. Plant cells store excess energy in molecules of starch. Many foods, such as potatoes, pasta, rice, and bread, come from plants and contain starch. When you eat these foods, your body breaks down the starch into glucose, a sugar your cells can use to get energy. Carbohydrates are important components of some cell parts. For example, the cellulose found in the cell walls of plants is a type of carbohydrate. Carbohydrates are also found on cell membranes. Lipids. Have you ever seen a cook trim fat from a piece of meat before cooking it? The cook is trimming away one kind of lipid. Lipids are compounds that are made mostly of carbon and hydrogen and some oxygen. Cell membranes consist mainly of lipids. Fats, oils, and waxes are all lipids. Gram for gram, fats and oils contain more energy than carbohydrates. Cells store energy from fats and oils for later use. For example, during winter, an inactive bear lives on the energy stored in its fat cells. Foods high in fats include whole milk, ice cream, and fried foods. Proteins. What do a bird's feathers, a spider's web, and a hamburger have in common? They consist mainly of proteins. Proteins are large organic molecules made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and in some cases, sulfur. Foods that are high in protein include meat, dairy products, fish, nuts, and beans. Much of a cell's structure and function depends on proteins. Proteins form part of a cell's membrane. Proteins also make up parts of the organelles within a cell. A group of proteins known as enzymes speeds up chemical reactions in living things. Without enzymes, the many chemical reactions that are necessary for life would take too long. For example, an enzyme in your saliva speeds up the digestion of starch. Starch breaks down in the sugars while still in your mouth. Nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are very long organic molecules. These molecules consist of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Nucleic acids contain the instructions that cells need to carry out all the functions of life. Foods high in nucleic acids include red meat, shellfish, mushrooms, and peas. One kind of nucleic acid is deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA. DNA is the genetic material that carries information about an organism and is passed from parent to offspring. This information directs a cell's functions. Most DNA is found in a cell's nucleus. The shape of a DNA molecule is described as a double helix. Imagine a rope ladder that's been twisted around a pole, and you'll have a mental picture of the double helix of DNA. The double helix forms very many small molecules connected together. The pattern and sequence in which these molecules connect make a kind of chemical code that the cell can read. Water and living things. Water plays many important roles in cells. For example, most chemical reactions in cells depend on substances that must be dissolved in water to react. And water itself takes part in many chemical reactions in cells. Water also helps cells keep their shape. A cell without water would be like a balloon without air. Think about how the leaves of a plant wilt when the plant needs water. After you add water to the soil, the cell absorbs the water and the leaves perk up. Water changes temperature slowly, so it helps keep the temperature of cells from changing rapidly, a change that can be harmful. Water also plays a key role in carrying substances into and out of cells. Without water, life as we know it would not exist on Earth.